Okay, welcome to Psych 232, Theories of Personality. Today we're talking about Gordon Allport and the trait approach. We're going to talk about Gordon Allport's personality theory. So let's go ahead and get started. Allport's theory is very different from the ones we've been talking about. The other ones, the earlier ones we've been talking about have been kind of like neo-Freudians, okay? They had some similarities to Freud. Gordon Allport's theory is very, very different. Okay, so for Gordon Allport, it's about hereditary and environment. Okay, so biology matters, so does the environment. Both heredity so has to do with your genetics, your biology, right, and the environment is just, you know, your social situation. So both heredity and environment both determine who we are. But according to Allport, our genetics provides the major portion of our uniqueness. It is our genetics, according to Allport, that determines mostly who we are, what makes us unique. Biology matters, okay? The environment matters, okay? Our genetics specifically is what really matters, according to Allport, and we'll say more about that. So our genetics, of course, interacts with our social environment. Our genetics, of course, have to do with the development of physiological structures, and we have biological tendencies, you know, which then interact with the environment. Of course, the environment will also affect us, okay? So they both matters, and our tendencies, of course, affect our behavior in the social environment. Keep in mind that no two environments are the same, okay? Everyone lives in a different environment, okay? Not even identical twins share the same environment, okay? Identical twins might share 100% of their DNA, 100% of their genetics, at least at the beginning to start with, okay? Later on, their genetics won't be identical, okay? Because of mutations and other things, their genetics will be slightly different down the road. But not even identical twins share the same environment, okay? Identical twins may look the same, even if they grew up in the same household, the environment of each is slightly different than the other. You do not treat them exactly the same. They do not have the exact same experiences. They are very similar, but their environments are not exactly the same. Here's something interesting according to Allport. According to Allport, we have two different personalities, okay? Your first personality is the one you have as an infant, and if you still have this personality as an adult, then you're considered a neurotic adult. In other words, you behave like an infant. So two distinct personalities. The first personality, which is the infant personality, is the one where your personality is driven by primitive biological urges and reflexes. So your personality is kind of driven more by things that are unconscious, things you can't really help. That sounds a little bit Freudian, but Allport is talking about, you know, biological stuff here. He's talking about stuff that's really based on research, okay? So infants are driven by biological urges. They need to eat, they need to poop, they need to sleep. They get cold, so you need to, you know, keep them warm. And, you know, when they don't get their way, they scream, they cry, right? They make a big fuss, okay? So they're driven by biological urges and reflexes. They can't help themselves. That's just the way they are, okay? So a child can scream, of course, when a child isn't fed, can lash out in frustration when upset, right? And you know what? That neurotic adult, that person who's an adult who should be different than a child, but because that person is neurotic, that person is still being driven by biological or just by biological and reflexes, okay? Still driven by things that are largely unconscious, right? That's the neurotic adult. That neurotic adult will also scream and lash out when upset, behaves just like a child. That's an unhealthy adult that's still behaving like a child. That's the personality you have as a child. You should have outgrown that. The adult personality, the healthy adult personality, is different. Adults, so personality number two, their personality should be more psychological, okay? More driven by conscious, rational thinking, more driven by what you're currently thinking about at the moment, more driven by the mind, okay? More driven by your thinking and your awareness of things, not by primitive urges, not like a child, okay? Not like a neurotic adult. A healthy adult, their thinking is more rational, more conscious, right? More psychological. Here's a very bold claim that Allport made. He said that adults are divorced from their past. The past, for a healthy adult that is, does not exert influence on their behavior. Sure, a lot of things happen to you in your past, okay? But as an adult, the things that happened to you in your past should not be driving your current behavior. Your current behavior should be driven by what you have to do at the moment, what you are thinking about at the moment, and the challenges you have at the moment. Not about the fact that you may have been neglected as a child, or maybe you weren't giving enough attention, or whatever it is. That should not be driving your personality, your behavior as an adult. Adults should be divorced from their past. And that is more likely to be the case, by the way, if, of course, things went very well for you as a child. Then as an adult, you will behave more rationally, right? More consciously, right? You're not being driven by the past. If you are a neurotic adult that had a lot of problems as a child, then you more likely are more likely a neurotic adult, and you are being driven by the past. You are still lashing out and angry and resentful because of things that happened to you in the past. Keep in mind, you can get angry about things in the present, right? But that's a normal functioning adult. But if you're angry, resentful, shy, anxious, whatever it is, because of things that happened to you in the past, then you are a neurotic adult. Your past should not be driving you if you're a healthy, normal adult. Adults are more concerned with the present and the future. That's what drives their personality, what they have to take care of now and what they're looking forward to in the future. That's what drives their behavior, according to Allport. Well, those are all interesting ideas. What Allport really stressed when it comes to his personality theory are personality traits. He believes in these things called personality traits. It seems like we were going to go in another direction, right? We're talking about biology and other things, conscious versus unconscious, right? But his theory is actually a modern theory based on a lot of research and statistical analysis and things like that. He believes in these things called personality traits. So personality traits, according to Gordon Allport, are predispositions to respond in the same way or in a similar manner. So if you are, for instance, aggressive, you tend to behave aggressively, frequently, okay? If you are shy, you tend to behave shy, frequently. These personality traits, right? We can measure them on these personality questionnaires, right? We can do statistical analyses with them. We can look for averages. According to Allport, these personality traits, these things that have been defined, okay, that describe how people are, according to Allport, they really exist in each of us. They're not just theoretical. They're not just labels that we came up with. According to Allport, they actually exist. Aggressiveness exists, shyness exists, okay, and others that he talked about, okay? And he says that they cause behavior. They are the cause of behavior, these personality traits. They are not only in response to a certain stimuli, but they cause us to seek out stimuli. So for instance, if you're aggressive, you don't just behave aggressively when somebody challenges you, but you seek out situations where you can exhibit this aggressive behavior. You seek more trouble. You look for more problems. You look for these situations, okay? These personality traits can be demonstrated empirically, okay? We can show that people behave aggressively in response to similar stimuli when they are aggressive, right? They will all behave aggressively or to some extent aggressively in response to something, right? We can do this. We can measure personality with questionnaires. We can subject people to situations that are likely to exhibit that aggressiveness or that personality traits, and we can see these similarities among people who share that trait. So this is not just theoretical here. It's not, I mean, it is theoretical, but it's not just something that we're thinking about. It's not just something we're saying. We are using science here. We're using research to really show that these things actually do cause us to behave in this way, these personality traits. He said these personality traits are interrelated, like aggressiveness and hostility. Aggressiveness has to do with your behavior. Hostility has more to do with how you feel. When you're hostile. Hostility is like long-term anger. It's like you're angry all the time. You're hostile, right? Those two things are related, okay? Hostility can drive aggressive behavior, okay? These personality traits in general are related. They relate to one another. They affect one another. okay? They can vary with the situation as well. A person can display one trait in one situation, but a different trait in another. A person, for instance, can display aggressiveness, let's say, out there, let's say with friends in a social situation, right? Where the person is being more him or herself, but they may not display that, let's say, that personality trait, let's say, in front of a judge, okay? Because they can be punished, okay? So they can vary. These personality traits in situations, we can express them more in one situation than another, or we can express different personality traits in different situations. Okay, so Allport really, his theory is really about personality traits. Okay, that's what he talked about. I know he has these other ideas, right? But he believes that these personality traits are actually biological. They're actually genetic. Okay. And he has different, he believes he has different personality traits. He labeled different personality traits in different ways. And this is where it's going to get a little bit confusing, a little bit complicated, because he has so many different labels. He said that personality traits are either individual traits or common traits. Individual traits are personality traits that are unique to a person and that define their character. Okay, he called those individual traits. Common traits are personality traits that we can share with others, that are influenced by, like, our culture, by our society, our environment. People from different cultures can have different common traits. Like, for instance, some cultures are more, well, in some cultures, people are more conscientious than others. For instance, Asian American cultures, they are very conscientious. They have those common traits like conscientiousness, a high degree of it, because they have that culture in common, okay? But there's other things about, let's say, those people, you know, from Asian culture, that also make them unique, things that are more about them and less about the culture. He called those individual traits. So we have individual traits that just make us unique, and we have common traits that have to do with our environment, our society, our culture, okay, that we get from that. There's a lot of labels here. We also have personal dispositions. Personal dispositions are individual traits, okay, that are peculiar or unique to an individual. He called these personal dispositions. So it's to do with a disposition to behave in a certain way. And there's different kinds of them. We have cardinal traits, according to Gordon Allport. Cardinal traits are very influential traits, you know, that kind of like a ruling passion. We have personality traits that basically really, affect us a whole lot, that influence us a lot. He called it like a ruling passion. It's a cardinal trait. Cardinal means like the cardinal would be someone who's like in charge, like a religious person, right? So it's a cardinal trait is a personality trait that's very important, that kind of rules over that. Like greed, if like we have that as a cardinal trait, if we're very greedy, it influences a lot about how we are. Like maybe we always want more money, we always want more and more of everything, okay? We're greedy, so to speak. And it affects a lot of things that we do. Or if we're altruistic and very helpful, we're helpful at work, we're helpful in other different places, you know, or sadism, right? We like to inflict pain on others. If that's a ruling passion, a cardinal trait of yours, that means that you are this way a lot, okay? And it influences you a lot. We also have central traits, okay? Central traits are about 5 to 10 themes, 5 to 10, you know, traits that best describe our behavior. And they can vary. For some people, it might be aggressiveness, self-pity, cynicism. For other people, it might be altruism, you know, gregariousness, sociability, or whatever it is. According to Allport, there's about 5 to 10 different things, 5 to 10 different personality traits, we can call them, that best describe us. And what those are is, well, it's just a matter of, I guess, of taking the personality test and see what it says. But these are 5 to 10 themes, things that best describe us. About 5, maybe 10 of them. And we also have secondary traits. Secondary traits are traits that are weaker, they're less important, right? And we display them inconsistently. Okay, they don't really define us that much. They don't really influence us that much. We do display them, but more inconsistently. And that would be like a preference for a certain kind of music, a certain kind of food. Sure, we have those preferences, but they're not that important. They don't influence us that much. And we show them kind of inconsistently. Sometimes, yes, we show our preference for that music or that food. Sometimes we don't. It depends on the situation. It depends on whether we're hungry or whether we're listening to music, whether we're eating. You know, it's more inconsistent. He called those secondary traits. They're more like preferences. He also distinguished between traits and habits and attitudes. Traits are different. Personality traits are different, okay? Habits are things that are specific and flexible responses to a certain stimuli. Okay, so habits are things that we do again and again when something is present, when we're exposed to something. That's a habit. Like, for instance, whenever we drive fast. That's a habit. Okay, habits are not traits. They're different. But several habits, several things that we do that in response to certain stimuli, right, may combine to form a trait, may imply a trait. Like brushing your teeth is a habit. It's just something you always do in the morning, right? When you go to the bathroom, let's say in the morning. Washing your hands is always something you do, let's say in the morning or before you eat or something like that, right? If you combine several things, brushing your teeth, washing your hands, taking a shower, or whatever it is, it implies the trait of cleanliness. Cleanliness is a trait, a personality trait. But those individual things are habits. But several habits can combine to form a personality trait. But habits are different than personality traits. Individually, they're different. Okay? Attitudes are different than personality traits. Attitudes refer to how we feel about something, our evaluation of something. It applies to a specific object. So maybe dislike of politicians. That's one of my personalities. I really dislike politicians. I don't trust them. They say whatever they have to say in order to get elected. Okay? Or let's say you like ice cream. That's a certain attitude. Or, you know, you enjoy, let's say, black and white films. That's an attitude as well. You like black and white films. So it implies that you like something, you enjoy it, you hate it, you dislike it. Those are attitudes. They imply we feel a certain way. That's different than a trait, a personality trait. That has more to do with who we are, that defines us. Attitudes is how we feel about a specific thing, a specific object. And he distinguished that from traits. So you can see there's all these labels and there's more, okay? After a while, it just seems ridiculous. And after a while, you're gonna be confused about what the heck is what, okay? Allport also talked about what he called the functional anatomy of motives. So here's the thing. And we touched upon this idea already, but now we're calling it the functional anatomy of motives. But it has to do with your personality, okay? According to Allport, motives or things that drive you, okay? Motives in normal, mature adults are independent of childhood, okay? Independent of childhood experiences in which they first appeared. So here's this idea again, that the adult personality is independent from childhood, okay? That it doesn't really have to do with the past, okay? And he called that functional anatomy of motives. So motives, things that drive our behavior, should be in mature adults are independent from childhood. And he called that the functional anatomy of motives. In other words, they're kind of self-driven. They're not self-driven, but they're driven more by the present, right? Not the past. So motives in the past could have been driven by specific things, okay? But in the future, they become autonomous or self-driven. In the past, for instance, you learned to work hard. Let's say you worked hard because you wanted to get good grades, right? You wanted to get that degree. You wanted to acquire wealth, right? Okay. Or maybe your parents taught you to work hard on the farm or whatever it is, or they taught you to work hard to get good grades in grade school or whatever it is, right? In childhood. And you learn to work hard. But as an adult, you continue to work hard because now it's an end to itself. Now it's self-driven. Now you work hard because that's just the way you are. In the past, you did it because you did it to survive. Okay, you did it to get good grades. You did it to make sure you had, you know, produce from the farm. You did it because you needed to work to earn a living, right? Now let's say that you're older and you have enough money, things are better. You don't have to work hard anymore. Maybe you don't even have to work anymore, but you continue to work hard. And it's now because it's a part of who you are. It is self-driven, okay? It's no longer because of what happened in childhood. So this is how things can be independent of childhood. They might have been driven by things in childhood or things in the past, but as an adult, they can become just a part of who you are. You don't need to do them anymore, okay? But you do because it's how you, because now you consider yourself a hardworking person, or it's a trait, a personality trait. Now it's hardworking is one of your traits. So adult motives cannot be understood according to Allport in terms of exploring the past. They're understood in terms of present behavior. Adult motives really have to do with the present, okay? They have to do with things about you, things you're facing currently, or things that you're looking forward to in the future. They have more to do with who you are, less to do with your childhood. Here's some more terms for you, okay? Preservative functional autonomy, okay? There's a lot of labels here, okay? And you really have to understand them, okay? And know the difference between one and the other. Preservative functional autonomy, those are low-level repetitive behaviors such as addictions and habits. So these are things that have to do with things that we kind of do over and over again, but they don't really define us. Like for instance, your preference for shopping at the same store, though it's cheaper to shop at Amazon, perhaps, right? More convenient to do at the click of a button, right? But you continue to say to go to that store, okay? Whether it's the Home Depot, or maybe it's you know, some department store, or maybe a store where they sell food, right? Or let's say a department store, okay? You can find things cheaper at Amazon. You can comparison shop online. But you continue to go to the store because it's a habit. It's a repetitive behavior, something you've been doing over and over again. Okay? That's, he called preservative functional autonomy. It's things that you do over and over again, addictions and habits. Or maybe you continue to drink, right? And you don't really need to drink. You're not at a party, you're not hanging out with people, but you're addicted to that alcohol. That's preservative functional autonomy. They don't really serve a purpose anymore, okay? You can do something else, probably would be better, more convenient, better serve you, but you continue to do it because you're used to it. That's preservative functional autonomy. Appropriate ego functional autonomy is different, okay? These are more important autonomous behaviors. These are more important behaviors that are also self-driven, but they relate to your values, okay? What you believe in, your self-image, how you see yourself, your lifestyle. So they're more related to your proprium, your ego, and that is Allport's word for personality, your proprium, okay? For instance, playing the piano in the past was driven by external pressure, let's say, right? You played the piano because your dad forced you or your mom forced you, right? They wanted you to do that. And you did it because they told you to. But as an adult, you play the piano because it's part of who you are. You are a musician, or you consider yourself this kind of person, this artistic person. They forced you to do it in the past, but now it's just who you are. Okay, it became part of your personality, and you became that kind of person. There's more to this. Allport also has, believe it or not, stages of development. So he talks about genetics, he talks about biology, he talks about personality traits, and he also has stages. Although his stages are not as well developed as, let's say, the Freudian stages or the stages of Erickson, but he briefly touched on stages, how different things emerge at different times. Ages 0 to 4. Okay, birth to about 4 years of age, okay? At the beginning, when you're born, before the program begins to emerge, so before your sense of self, your ego, right, who you are, your personality, before that begins to emerge, according to Allport, you have no self-awareness, right? You don't really know who you are. You don't recognize yourself in a mirror or anything like that. You have no self-awareness. You operate automatically and reflexively. You're selfish, you're dependent, okay? You're being driven by biological urges, okay? By reflexes. That's the way it is at the beginning, before your personality has emerged, before your sense of self. He called that the proprium. Freud would call it the ego, right? The part of you that really is about your personality, okay? And it goes through certain stages. First, you develop so initially there's no self, okay? No self-awareness, no personality, no proprium, no ego, okay? And then we get so that first stage, right? We get that first stage, the bodily self. That's the first stage, where the infant becomes aware of their own existence. They distinguish their body from objects and the environment. They basically become aware that they're different from a chair, different from mommy, okay? So for instance, they may recognize themselves in the mirror, know that they are something different from the other objects around them. That's called the bodily self, okay? And then self-identity emerges, where children realize that their identity, who they are, remains intact despite changes in the environment. So maybe they go outside, but they are still who they are. They're in a different home. Or you can dress them differently, but they still recognize themselves. They know they are something distinct, something different. They have their own identity, okay? That's called self-identity. 3, self-esteem emerges. Children learn to take pride in their accomplishments. They learn to feel good about the things they do. That is self-esteem, and that's all ages 0 to 4. Ages 4 to 6, you get stages 4 and 5. You get 4 is extension of self, okay? Where children come to recognize that objects and people are a part of the world, so they get to see, they realize that they're also connected, let's say, to their parents. That's mommy, that's daddy. I mean, they knew that beforehand, but during this time, they extend their sense of self. Their idea of who they are also includes other people. It includes objects, maybe toys and pets. It includes other people like their mom and dad, or maybe even their friends, right? Who they are. 5, you get the stage of self-image, right? Where children develop an idealized image of themselves and their behavior. So here they have an idea of who they are, but it's very idealized, okay? They become aware of satisfying and failing to satisfy parental demands, right? When they're a good boy, when they're a good girl, you know, bad boy, bad girl, right? And they develop an idealized self-image, right? Of being good or being bad or something like that. Most of the time they think they're good, right? But it's idealized. They don't really know what that means, okay? Or even if you ask children during this stage, right? During this age, like when they're around, you know, 6 years of age or so, 5 or 6, you tell them what they want to do when they're grown up, and they'll usually tell you something that's more like a fantasy. You know, they'll say that, oh, that they want to be like a movie star, or they want to be you know, a rock star or something like that. Or they said just want to be famous, or a YouTube star or something like that. You know, they might say something like, I want to be a fighter pilot, or I want to like, you know, I want to be like a race car driver, but it's all very idealized. These things are more fantasies. They're not really based on reality or their abilities. It's just idealized. It has to do with an idealized self-image where they see themselves in a certain way and they want to be these great things. And it's just an idealized version of themselves. Later on, they'll learn more about the way they really are. More about this, 6 to 12, you have the stage of the self as a rational coper. From 6 to 12, they begin to apply reason and logic to their everyday problems. Yeah, school is very important during this time, and even before this, but here's the time when they really begin to use reason and logic, okay? This is the time when they're more capable of those things, and they apply more logic, more reason to solving problems and doing things at school. Stage 7, he called appropriate striving, and that is adolescence, appropriate striving. Remember, the proprium refers to your ego, your sense of I, right? That, you know, that means I, me, right? Your personality, the proprium is personality. So appropriate striving is when you begin to formulate long-range goals and plans. You really get to begin to develop an idea of who you are and what you're going to do with yourself. And then we have the stage of adulthood. During adulthood, right? You know, you become an adult, and if you are a normal, mature adult, that means that you are functionally autonomous. You're not driven by childhood, right? Your behavior is divorced from childhood, okay? You are driven consciously by what you're thinking, what you're doing at the moment, and what you're looking forward to in the future, right? Adults rationally create their own lifestyles according to Allport. And we touched upon this already. That's what the adult personality is like. Now, if you're an abnormal adult, a childish adult, a neurotic adult, then you're still being driven by your past. You're still anxious, angry, resentful because of your past, right? Your past is kind of getting in the way and causing you a lot of problems, emotional problems, perhaps psychological problems, and they're getting in the way of you achieving your goals, right? You're not behaving logically, rationally. Instead, you're behaving emotionally, illogically. You're behaving like that child. That's the stage of adulthood, okay? Where you should be different, no longer driven by the past. Sure, you dealt with it and it's affected you, but as an adult, you should be driven by what you have to do at the moment and what you have to do in the future. And I can relate to that to some extent, you know. Yeah, I mean, I have to go to work, I have to do my job, and I approach it logically, you know. I have to do this, and I make sure I do this right and this. And you know, when my relationship with my wife, even though it's difficult at times, I try to approach it rationally. It's better if we're together. We have to raise our children right, you know, and we have a household. We have a lot of things we need to take care of. We're better off together than we are apart. But if you behave more like a child, having fights and arguments, you're more likely to say, screw this, I'm out of here, right? And abandon your relationships. You're behaving more like a spoiled brat, the things that think you need to get your way all the time. You don't really need to. It's not the way it is for adults. You need to be more rational and understand that things happen and you have to deal with them effectively, rationally at the moment, because depending on what you're facing and what your future plans are, not because of what happened in the past, not because you can't trust someone because you had difficulties in the past. You trust somebody based on what they show you in the present. Okay, so that's the way adulthood should be. So parent-child interactions. Parent-child interactions are very important to development of the program, development of the self, the development of your personality. They are very important, right? But remember, the adult is divorced from this, but parent-child interactions are very important, okay? Especially interactions with the mother. Interactions with the mother, the primary caregivers, right, are very important. If the mother provides sufficient affection, sufficient security, right, the proprium, the sense of self, develops gradually and steadily. The child will achieve positive psychological growth. If you have good experiences with your mother, your caregiver, yeah, your sense of self, your personality will develop gradually, little by little. It just starts with you recognizing yourself at first, and then an idea of who you are. You're a boy, you're a girl, this is your name. And then eventually you like to play with this, and you're this way. And eventually it gets more and more complex. Your personality, your sense of self. It develops gradually if your mother, your caregiver, does a good job of raising you, of taking care of you. And you'll become psychologically healthy. And as an adult, you won't be driven by, by things that happened in the past. You'll be driven by the present and the future. Okay? If things went well, it's easier to kind of not be driven by the past. It's different if the mother or the primary caregiver frustrates those childhood needs. If the mother, the primary caregiver, doesn't do a good job, right? They neglect you, they abandon you, they beat you, they abuse you, right? Then it's different. The child will become insecure, right? Not very trusting, more likely to be aggressive, more likely to be demanding, jealous, and self-centered, okay? You cause your child to be more psychologically maladjusted, okay? If you don't do a good job early on as the mother or as the primary caregiver. As an adult, the child will be neurotic, their personality undifferentiated. They don't really know who they are, okay? They act irrationally, emotionally, impulsively to things, not based on a certain identity, not based on who they are. They act like a child, they throw tantrums, right? Their motives are not functionally autonomous. They are still behaving like a child. They are still being driven by their past. They're still angry and resentful and not trusting because of things that happened to them in the past. Instead of just dealing with things rationally in the present and planning for the future. So yes, a normal, healthy adult should be divorced from their past, but if things don't go well early on, you will not be divorced from your past. You'll have a lot of emotional, psychologically maladjusted behavior that will continue to get in the way of your present and the future. And you're still angry, resentful, jealous, whatever it is. But if things went well, That's not, those things are not, if things went well early on in your childhood, then childhood needs are no longer driving your personality, no longer driving, you know, your present or your future. Okay. So yes, it's a bold statement that says that adults are divorced from their past, but he meant healthy adults, not neurotic adults. And it all has to do with what happens early on with the mother. And here's something that we're going to see later on in other personality theories. But Allport has a list of what a healthy adult personality is like. He has this list, and we'll see other lists with other theories that come later. So he kind of influenced those other theories that come after him. The healthy adult personality, according to Allport, extends their sense of self to people and activities, okay, beyond themselves. So the healthy adult personality extend themselves to family, society. They see themselves as having a place within family, within society. It's not just me, okay? They're different, they're more connected, okay? They relate warmly to others, exhibiting intimacy, compassion, tolerance, okay? They relate well to others. Yes, they can get close to others, you know, intimacy, compassion, right? Kindness, right? Tolerate other people, okay? Even people who are different, right? They relate warmly to others. They have self-acceptance that helps them achieve emotional security. They accept and love themselves. And because of that, they're emotionally secure, right? They're secure in themselves, okay? They're not as anxious or fearful of abandonment. They love themselves, they accept themselves, and they know that they're worthwhile, despite the fact that other people may not always treat them the way they would like. They still love and accept themselves. They hold a realistic view of life, okay? They're more likely to see things the way they really are, okay? They develop personal skills, right? They work on skills, right? They're committed to a certain kind of work. They have careers, they have jobs, right? They're devoted to things. They have a sense of humor. They can laugh at themselves. They have insight into themselves. They know who they really are. And they have a unifying philosophy that directs their future goals. They know who they are, and they have things they believe in, and those beliefs drive what they want to do with themselves. It drives their, you know, their future goals. So that was Adler's personality theory. Now let's talk about assessment in Allport's theory, right? What kind of assessments are used for Allport's theory, or what kind of assessments did he do? Okay, did he use? Okay, he used 11 different techniques. We're only going to describe a few. He used something called the personal document technique, where he examined the diaries of people that people kept, right? He examined autobiographies, letters that people wrote to determine the number and kind of personality traits. And you can do this, by the way, scientifically. You can analyze letters, autobiographies, diaries, and basically things that people write. And you can analyze them scientifically and use statistics, and you can see that certain words come up more than others, the way they express themselves, and it can reveal something about people, something about their personality. If they use certain words over and over again, or they express certain things over and over again, you see certain themes, certain things that are consistent in the things that they write, or how they write about themselves and their experiences. Third person material has to do with things that have to do with what other people think of them, right? Similar analysis, but it has to do with, you know, with basically other people he called judges that read material, and they agree on a certain set of traits and categories. So other people, let's say, will read, let's say, a biography, or other people will basically read something that they wrote, and they'll judge what they wrote. And they agree that this person has a certain kind of personality trait. They agree on certain categories that it shows this or this. But third person material just basically means the opinion of other people, how other people view them, what other people write about them, and what other people think about what they said and what they've written and things like that. It's third person material. Personal document technique, that's more first person material. It's the things that they wrote about themselves and the things that they think about themselves. Third person material has to do with things that they think about them, that other people think about them, what other people write about them, what other people see as far as their personality traits. This is just basically other people, probably graduate students, sitting around looking at things that have been written about those people and trying to figure out personality traits from that, but done scientifically, because they also use computer analysis. They look for letters, words, in what has been written about them and what they have written themselves that indicate personality traits. Things that express anger, rage, hostility, aggression, right? The things you write, by the way, say a lot about who you are, about your personality. And they did these things, but they didn't just look at them and basically write whatever they wanted or come up with whatever conclusion they wanted. They analyze things statistically on the computer, and they see how often certain things come out, how certain things are used. It's actually a scientific analysis. Other things, he also used something called the study of values. It's an objective self-report. It's a personality questionnaire, basically, where values are assumed to be personality traits, and they represent strongly held interests. So the values that come up are values included in that, in the study of values, are what he called theoretical values, economic values, aesthetic values, social values, political values, religious values, okay? And if you copy and paste that path right there, that address, onto the address bar of your browser, it'll take you right there, and you answer some questions. Click, 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 submit, and it'll tell you how you score on those things. It's a personality, it's a personality questionnaire, basically, that measures your personality according to Allport's study of values. That's what he called it, the study of values. Okay. Research on Allport's theory. Allport believed that spontaneous, purposeless, largely unconscious behavior reveals your personality traits. So the things that you often do without thinking kind of give hints about your personality, like the expressions you make that maybe you're not really thinking about, okay? The looks, the kind of gestures, they say things about your personality. And I'll mention some of those in a moment, some examples of those. Okay, but yes, there are things about your behavior, your gestures, expressions that give away, according to Allport, what your personality is like. Studies reveal that personality can also be assessed from, audio recordings, right? Just a recording of your voice, from videos where they have your voice and, a visual of what you're doing, right? From pictures, right? Your personality can also be, there are clues to your personality from pictures, facial expressions, vocals, gestures, all those things. They give away your personality according to Allport. Some people can form reliable impressions of others solely on appearance and expression. Some people are very good at reading people, and they can interact with you, and they can look at you, and they'll note your tone of voice, they'll note your posture, your expressions, and they're very good at forming an impression of you. And they'll know, for instance, that you're someone who can be trusted, or you're someone who cannot be trusted, or you're someone who's friendly, or you're someone who's dangerous. Some people are very good at reading people. And by the way, some people are naturally good at this, but by the way, you can be trained to do this. If you work, for instance, for like the FBI, the CIA, or some government organization like that, you have to be good at this stuff, and they are trained to do that. They are trained to read people and how to interact with people to get the information from them that they want. They're very good at that. They will also know, by the way you're dressed. And the way you're dressed says something about your personality as well. Let's keep going. Other research on Allport's theory actually relates to what we just talked about. So like I said, your personality can, there's hints to your personality from your voice, from your tone of voice, your behavior, your gestures, your expressions, all those things. And here's some research about that. The trait of agreeableness is revealed by laughter, friendly interactions. So if you're the kind of person you laugh a lot, you get along well with others, right? They can see that. That basically reveals that you probably have the trait that's called agreeableness. It basically means you're kind, you're warm, not antagonistic, you get along well with others. It's a personality trait. And we can kind of see that in you by just your interactions with people and the fact that you laugh a lot, you're friendly and kind, it seems like you're having a good time. Extroversion is revealed by laughter, smiles, enjoyment, right? You can tell when people are extroverted, right? That they're, extroverted people like to be with others. They like to talk to others. They like to party, hang out with people. They're very social, okay? They give themselves away, extroverted people, because they laugh a lot, they smile a lot, they're happy a lot, they enjoy being around others. You can tell that they have that personality trait. Conscientiousness has to do with following the rules, being organized, right? If you're conscientious, it means you work hard, you follow the rules, you're organized, you're punctual, that kind of stuff, right? Conscientious people are good workers, good students for the most part. Being conscientious is revealed by a controlled smile. When you are conscientious, you smile, but you control yourself more. Averted gaze. You don't always look directly, you don't always look at people directly in the eyes, right? It's like you don't do that as much. You kind of tend to look away because you respect people more. You follow the rules more. You listen to people more, and you do what you're told, so to speak. You're conscientious. You follow the rules. Have movements down and away from the observer. Like I said, you tend to look away. You can kind of see that in people who are highly conscientious, right? They don't challenge you as much. They don't look you to also, always directly in the eye. They look away, right? Head movements away, right? Their smile is controlled. They control themselves a lot. They're conscientious. They're punctual. They follow the rules. They're hard workers. They do as they're told. Okay. That is the last slide. Okay, so I will stop recording.